Imagine a game set in space, where you can explore anything and everything you want. Take over ships, engage in space combat, land and explore planets, and build an understanding of a large, expansive world that is much bigger than you. One game set out to do just that, and today we're going to be talking about Starfield and what makes it both loved and hated. I've watched many reviews, positive and negative, to make this video as fair as possible, although I personally am someone who never really liked the game. You may disagree with me, and that is fine, but I just cannot find a reason to like Starfield. That's not to say it has nothing good, it just doesn't have any specific mechanic that makes it fun. So welcome to Behind the Bug. In this episode, we will analyze the game design in Starfield to discuss the good, the bad, and what it means for the broader games industry. So to start, I want to give credit where it is due with this game. The ship combat can be very fun. I do recognize in the right context, you can really enjoy this system. The ground combat is similar. If you have the right guns and abilities, it can be somewhat fun, although I do believe it still lacks substance. The guns and modifications are fairly expansive and give you a lot of agency to play the game as you wish. Starfield also has some great graphics. The game genuinely looks good when you are playing it. These kind of graphics are what you'd expect from a large AAA studio in much smaller games. So to see it on this scale is actually very impressive. Most games that have this much content and playtime will cut corners with graphics in order to save on budget. Given the incredibly long development time of this game, it is expected that this much quality would go into the graphics, and they delivered on that front. I've never considered graphics to be very important personally. Can see why others do really like how Starfield looks. It does help immersion. World building in Starfield is actually one of the strong suits of the story. The world is interesting and it provides plenty of great opportunities to explore and see what it has to offer. You can find out about the different factions, technologies, and events that fill the world. Bethesda does a good job of hiding these little bits in the story. As always, they also have moments of storytelling through the design of environments that are well done. Starfield has a lot of playtime. While the main story is nothing shockingly long, the game mainly consists of side quests and exploration that could span a significant amount of time. These elements are optional, but provide a lot of really unique and interesting side plot. Some people look for that in a game, something they can get hundreds of hours into and still find new things to enjoy. If you want to play an open world RPG that has a ton of playtime, it might be a good option. The most important thing to highlight here is that Starfield does have a sizable audience. It did not flop, and while it has definitely waned in popularity since its release, as would be expected, it still has a large player base. Despite the complaints and poor design choices, plenty of people can still enjoy this game, which is great. The more people playing and enjoying games, the better. What Bethesda set out to do was a very interesting concept. They have tried to bring together a lot of different kinds of sci-fi into one large cohesive piece. Generally, I would say the game tries to do a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. Purely in concept, it is great, but adding a ton of features is not always the best idea. Oftentimes, it would be better to be good at one thing than bad at 50. For those of you who really like Starfield, I'm going to criticize a lot of its design flaws here. Feel free to disagree, and in no way does this mean that no one can enjoy the game. For some people, Starfield is a great game. If you happen to be one of them, I implore you to see some of the complaints and let me know your thoughts in the comments afterwards. Friendly discussion can help us understand more about this game and what makes it fun for some. I want to start with a little bit of rapid fire on small things that Starfield should have done. These are what I'm going to call missed layups. Firstly, the crafting system is absolutely ruined by the weight limits of the inventory. I cannot express how annoying it is that nearly every item, including crafting materials, has a weight. If this wasn't the case, crafting would be so much easier. For a game about exploration with an incredibly vast list of items you can use, the inventory system actively encourages just getting rid of stuff, which takes away from the items as a whole. Related to that, the weapons never felt unique. One of the best parts of sci-fi worlds is the fact that you can design any weapon design you could possibly imagine. The fact a gun could be literally anything imaginable and function because of years of innovation and new technology gives developers endless possibilities. Yet Starfield has so many guns that feel identical. Some are literally identical copies of existing guns with better stats, just listed as rarer. Ships should be used more. They can be very fun when used right and with some tweaks to how combat works. Flying them should feel a little more enjoyable. You should be able to land them yourself or even in a common landing sequence so long as you can fly over a planet and see the cities and mountains like No Man's Sky. You should not just fast travel everywhere. They made ships for a reason. It just breaks up the game into loading screens, which, no matter how quick, are still loading screens that just break up the game. Traveling on planets needs to be faster in some way. It can be fun to explore areas, but it takes so much time just walking around. The different abilities help, but why not just have some sort of vehicle? There are hundreds of random small extra features in this game. It should not take that long to travel between locations on the planets. The inventory is awful. Why? There have been hundreds of games with completely functional inventories for years. There are a lot of items, but you could still make an effective inventory system. I also found that the game never tells you how to quickly switch weapons. I learned how to from a friend. For most of the early game, I opened the inventory to switch every time. The map navigation is also incredibly poorly done. Maps have been around for thousands of years. They should be able to find a simple way to map things in this game. These are some things that were missed opportunities. Maybe there are things that will be patched or updated later. My next complaints, however, are not as easily fixed. Starfield's developers did its world a major disservice. The first of which is how often they break immersion. I'm immediately pulled out of the world whenever something suddenly and painfully reminds me that this is just a game. When I'm walking around and cannot find where I'm supposed to go, when I land on a planet and instead of going to my chosen location, I am sent somewhere completely separate, when I want to continue a mission but have to endure 10 random loading screens. I will give them credit, it could be worse, but it takes so long to gain a player's immersion, and it takes seconds to rob them of that experience. For me in this game, it happens constantly. I have to save, I have to wait for stamina, I have to walk a long way, I have to jump through several empty systems, I have to open a door and load into a building. All of these things tear you out of the world. You have to ignore all of this to try and place yourself in the world and enjoy the role-playing. But it can be so hard with these mistakes. You would hope the bad immersion could be helped by decent gameplay. It seems like Starfield is begging you not to play it. Enemies are massive bullet sponges in a game where you have limited ammo. I usually play games on a higher difficulty, but I switched Starfield into easy mode to try to be able to enjoy it. The menus are so frustrating to navigate that it is constantly pulling me away. There's so many things to micromanage and maintain in order to play the game. It seems like everything that is going on is a chore that I have to get through to find anything enjoyable, which is different from a challenge. If something is challenging, it takes skill and practice. But everything I am talking about with Starfield, from stamina to inventories to map and navigation, is just annoying and time consuming. There was never a solid 10 minutes where I got to enjoy playing the game without some annoying chore popping up and ruining the experience. What really ruined Starfield for me is its tendency to try to be a jack of all trades, but master of none. It never picks one thing it wants to be. It tries to be all of them. As a result, it never gives you a reason to like it. Most great games will have something you can point to as what makes it good. You can add that the story was good or the graphics were good, etc. But it fundamentally comes down to one thing that the developers did very well. I've talked about this concept before on this channel. Starfield lacks that crowning achievement. Instead, it does a million different things pulling in different directions that never feel cohesive or individually interesting enough to delve into. Most people I talk to about Starfield cannot name what makes the game great. They cannot tell me what one thing it does uniquely better than everything else. Finally, I want to talk about the story. The game story, from what I have experienced and heard, does two things wrong. First, it never grabs your attention. The start of the game is not interesting, and many people will tell you have to play a certain number of hours before it gets good, which was never said of any truly great game. While this is not a fatal mistake, the second one is. Your choices and actions in Starfield never feel impactful. You cannot pick a side or make a major moral decision. Nothing you ever do is consequential. Your decisions have no consequences and no rewards. Nothing significant changes in the world as a result of your actions. Many of the conversations I had in the early game do not even really have branching options. They'll just be a list of options that loop back to the same list of options after they answer your question. A role-playing game has to involve consequential actions and decisions, otherwise you are not playing a character. When playing Starfield, I feel like I'm following a specified path that goes one way. Sometimes you get the illusion of choice, but it loops back to the same trail. You can look at the world and enjoy its sights, but you can never change it. You can never have an impact on it. An RPG without meaningful choices is like a restaurant with no food. You can maybe enjoy it for a little while, but you will always be waiting for something more meaningful than just the idea. Now I want to do something a little different than I have in the past with this channel. I'm going to break down a few specific interactions from the first section of the game and use them as examples of my analysis from earlier. I'm not going to be showing anything from later in the game, but if you want to avoid the spoilers, feel free to skip ahead using the timestamp in the description. First off, to illustrate some of my complaints about combat, let's analyze this interaction on a station over Venus. For context, we are looking for someone that a satellite indicated was heading to this station. We know there has to be some sort of clue here, and the game provides an objective marker showing where that evidence is. Now when I did this interaction, I still had the game on normal mode, so the enemies were pretty hard, and I was nearly out of ammo. I was not expecting a large challenge this early, but I would quickly be surprised. The first few attempts I spent setting up my inventory and trying to find supplies before getting completely beat. Now part of this may be because I was not playing very well. It was definitely not my day for playing games, but you get the idea. I had no clear flanking angle despite my many attempts to find one, so I would have to take it head on. At first I made some headway, stealing ammo as I got kills and progressed, but some enemies were complete bullet sponges that were just impossible for me to kill. Remember, these are not special high-level enemies. They are nearly identical to the other enemies and do not provide much in terms of special loot when killed. After a while, I gave something a try. Instead of engaging the enemies, I ran straight towards the objective, ignoring enemies that I could. My best gun was a shotgun, and without any clear flanking and the enemy requiring multiple clips to kill, it was going to be very hard to take them out, if I could even get enough ammo. So instead, I just ran. Shockingly, that worked. I tried to actually kill enemies on the return trip, but eventually gave up and just ran back to my ship, ignoring them again. If combat is important, it should not be this easy to ignore, and it should not be this frustrating. Most games will make sure you have enough ammo or can at least find enough ammo if you keep looking. This area provided nothing. One time I even found a room that was locked. After I picked the lock, I found that there was basically nothing in the room. If you're going to have a player find a room off to the side, pick a lock, and look around inside that room, and then reward them with only a few items that are not interesting, that is bad game design. End of story. You have to reward that kind of exploration if you're going to have it. It would be better to not have this room than to disappoint the player that much. Overall, this interaction was frustrating, and the easiest solution was to completely cheat the situation and ignore all enemies. The next interaction I want to look at is when you first go on a mission with Sam Coe. You go to his home planet where his family originates. In fact, his family were the ones that first landed on the planet. You are to find his ancestors' maps and look for an artifact that was noted by an anomaly on standards a long time ago. The maps are stored in the bank, so you plan to go there. Upon entering the city, you find out that the bank is getting robbed, so you decide to help. The gang won't negotiate with the authorities, but they will negotiate with you. I made an attempt to convince the gang leader that they should let the hostages go. I failed, so the marshal has a new plan. I could either ask to see the hostages or sneak in the back door and then take them out before the hostages are killed. I decided to sneak through the back door. Immediately, I am greeted by someone detecting me despite my best efforts to remain hidden. After a lot of fumbling around and very poor combat, I slowly take out all the enemies. Now, I actually do not think I could have played it worse, and I would be curious to see if it is even possible to actually have the hostages die in this encounter. Because despite me taking forever to kill the bank robbers, the hostages were still safe and sound by some absolute miracle. The fact that the hostages survived after how I played is evidence of how little consequences your actions have in Starfield. In any well-designed RPG, I would have lost here, and the hostages would have died. There may have been resulting consequences for my failure, or I may have had to reset a save and try again. Even if the player has to try again, it still provides feedback and shows their actions have consequences. Instead, I felt like I had cheated the game and still won despite abject failure. Now this next example goes a little bit more into the story of the game. None of this is a major spoiler, just discussing one mission that is part of the overall main story. You can skip ahead to the end of this section using the timestamp below as mentioned previously. I want to dive into a specific story beat to really show what I mean when discussing the story being inconsequential. To do that, I first have to explain what happens during this mission. You are working for Constellation, seeking out artifacts across the galaxy. Your character is tasked with helping a fellow member of Constellation, who is the CEO of a large shipbuilding corporation. You are in the city of Neon, planning to negotiate with someone who has stolen an artifact. You later will find out that this artifact was stolen from another corporate CEO named Slayton. I had my character first make plans for the meeting, setting it up completely in my favor. The guards were on my side, the doors would close on my command, and I knew that the robber was very desperate to sell the artifact since he stole it from his employer. We make a deal after threatening the seller and buy the artifact. Upon leaving the room, I am greeted by some of Slayton's guards. They tell us my ship has been impounded because he wants his artifact back. I convince them to back off, then go to Slayton's office to sort it out. After attempting to make a meeting with Slayton, I am forced to fight my way to him. I work my way through his office, taking out several of his guards and other employees along the way. Then I make it to Slayton. I decide not to just shoot him and negotiate a bit. He makes it very clear he wants his artifact, but is eventually willing to pass on it provided I do one thing. What is that one thing that is so valuable to him that he'll let my ship go? I have to decide the fate of the robber who took that artifact from him. I tell the robber he is free to go, and I get my ship back. None of the decisions that I made had a clear impact in any way. When the only major decision ends up being, do you kill this side character that is likely never important again in a main story mission? That is bad writing. You may say, maybe that character does become important in some way and this is accounted for. But if that was the case, you'd have to make that clear to the player. If it feels like deciding to spare someone or kill them has zero impact on the story, then it is hard to place any weight on the decision. It feels meaningless, and it is. Not to mention, Slayton's decision makes zero sense. He was willing to threaten the lives of many employees and have me destroy his office for this artifact. Then suddenly he's willing to let me go if I decide the fate of someone? Then even when I decide to spare someone he clearly wants to kill, I'm still let free with zero consequences. Starfield does not make it clear why anything matters, because frankly none of it does. Nothing you do impacts the story or your character's future. The game is functionally linear, which is fine, but it is not fine for an open world RPG that pretends to have choice to actually be perfectly linear without even trying to make it seem like your choices matter. Starfield is a game that does not know what it should be. It has some systems for resource collection, and some systems for dogfighting, and some systems for a first-person shooter. I cannot tell you what Starfield is, because I do not think anyone knows what it is. As a game, it does everything poorly and nothing exceptionally, which is why I would say it is not a good game. The design decisions are at best questionable and most likely simply bad design. Despite nearly a decade in development, it is hard to say that this game was well crafted. To the contrary, it seems that all the features and writing are half-baked attempts at a meaningful role-playing game that is empty and full of broken promises. Starfield is clearly not an exceptionally good game, yet it still was able to sell a lot of copies. Today's games industry is suffering from this problem. Great games sell well, but so do mediocre or even bad games. If we want to see well-built and exciting releases in the future, we have to only buy and play games that are genuinely fun. As a consumer, you should support games with good design that provide a fun experience. Games like Starfield that continue to receive support encourage companies to continue making half-baked, poorly designed games. As an overall industry, this is bad in the long term. For the short term, it is a safe bet for companies to spend as little as possible making bad games, since they will sell regardless. With services like Game Pass making it so developers only have to make a deal with Microsoft in order for a game to be profitable regardless of its quality, it is becoming even easier to release bad games. Of course, Game Pass is not all bad, but it has contributed to the growing problem of poor quality games. The future of the games industry lies in the hands of consumers and what games they decide to buy. Consider that the next time you hear of a new game release, and do your part to support good designers. Thank you.